Did you seriously think you could just move your parents into our house without even asking me, Daniel? My voice trembled, a mix of anger and disbelief pouring out with each word. Daniel, my husband of 5 years, barely glanced up from his laptop. His smirk, a look I had grown to despise over time, spread across his face. Emma, stop being so dramatic. It's not a big deal. Besides, it's only temporary, he said casually, as though I didn't deserve a say in the matter. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he added, "Let's be real. It's not like you can stop it." His words hit me like a slap across the face. This wasn't just any house. It was my house. The cozy 2-story haven my grandparents had lovingly passed down to me. Nestled in a peaceful suburb, it was the place I had always envisioned raising our 2-year-old son, Noah. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, far removed from the toxic grip of Daniel's overbearing parents. "You do remember this house is in my name, right?" I shot back, my hands trembling as I balled them into fists. I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside, I was a mess of anger and sadness. For the first time, I found myself questioning the man I thought I knew. Daniel's smirk faltered for a moment before returning, though weaker now. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Noah toddled into the room, his little arms reaching out for me. His wide grin melted away some of my frustration. Forcing a smile, I scooped him up, kissed his forehead, and held him close. At least Noah didn't understand the suffocating tension filling the room. "Daniel, this is not okay," I said, trying to keep my voice calm for Noah's sake. His small fingers tugged playfully at my necklace as I spoke. "Your parents have never respected me or our space. Why are you doing this now?" "They're family, Emma," Daniel replied with a shrug, not even bothering to meet my eyes. "You wouldn't understand." The word family felt like a cruel joke. My family, who ran a small, beloved coffee shop in town, was warm, loving, and supportive. They were everything Daniel's parents weren't. His mother, Linda, and father, Roger, had been dismissive and overbearing from the moment I met them. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, the sound slicing through the room like a knife. My stomach sank as I peered through the peephole. There they were, Linda and Roger, standing on the porch with their suitcases, looking ready to invade my life. "Fine," I hissed, keeping my voice low enough that Noah wouldn't hear. "Let them in, but this isn't over." Handing Noah to Daniel, I opened the door. Linda swept past me without so much as a hello, her overpowering perfume choking the fresh air in the house. Roger followed, his usual stern expression making it clear he barely acknowledged my existence. I felt my stomach twist. This was only the beginning. The first morning with Linda and Roger in my house felt like stepping into enemy territory. It wasn't just the silence that grated on me, though that was thick enough to suffocate. It was their constant judgmental presence. Linda acted like she owned the place, floating around in her silk robe, rearranging my carefully organized kitchen without so much as a, "Hey, is this okay?" "This cereal isn't healthy for Noah," she commented as I poured breakfast for my son, her eyes narrowing at the box on the counter. "It's just cereal," I replied, my voice tight as I clenched my jaw to keep from snapping. "Noah's perfectly fine." Linda shook her head, that condescending smile spreading across her face. "You're too lenient. No wonder he doesn't sleep through the night." I bit my tongue and focused on Noah, who happily munched on his cereal, blissfully unaware of the tension. I wasn't about to let Linda ruin my morning, though she was clearly trying her best. But it didn't stop there. That evening, after struggling to get Noah to sleep, I was humming softly to calm him when Linda barged into his room like she owned the place. "You're still struggling to get him down?" she asked, her voice dripping with judgment. "Clearly you're doing something wrong." I whipped my head around to look at her, barely able to contain my irritation. "I'm doing the best I can," I said, my voice trembling from the effort of keeping it steady. "Well," she said, folding her arms across her chest, "maybe if you had a proper job, you'd have some structure in your life. This stay-at-home routine clearly isn't working for you." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and for a moment, I couldn't trust myself to speak. This was my house. She was a guest here, a guest who had overstayed her welcome. And yet she acted like she had every right to criticize me, my parenting, and my life. "This is my house, Linda," I said finally, my voice firm despite the fire burning inside me. "You're a guest here, don't forget that." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that made my blood boil. "Oh, Emma, Daniel never mentioned how delusional you are. This is his house too, and as his mother, I have every right to be here." The words stayed with me long after she left the room. That wasn't just overstepping, that was a declaration of war. The next morning, I woke up to find Linda in Noah's room, rifling through his drawers. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice low but laced with anger. "Organizing," she said without looking up, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "This room is a mess." "That's it," I said, my voice rising as my patience finally snapped. "I want you out of my house. Now." Linda turned to face me, her expression a mix of mock surprise and disdain. "Your house?" she repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Sweetheart, this is Daniel's house too, and he wants us here." I stormed out of the room, my heart pounding and my thoughts racing. Daniel's betrayal felt like a knife to the back. How could he let his parents take over our home like this? How could he let them treat me this way? That night, as I lay awake in bed, I made a decision. I was done being their doormat. If Linda and Roger thought they could walk all over me, they were in for a rude awakening. I didn't know how I was going to take back control of my home, my life, and my future. But one thing was clear. The fight wasn't over. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to stand up for myself. By the time Daniel came home from work the next day, I was ready for a showdown. I'd spent the entire afternoon stewing over everything, Linda rearranging my kitchen, criticizing my parenting, and now rifling through Noah's belongings. My home was starting to feel like a battlefield, and I was tired of being the one constantly on defense. As he walked through the door, loosening his tie like nothing was wrong, I didn't waste any time. "We need to talk, Daniel," I said firmly, standing in the kitchen with my arms crossed. He looked up at me, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "What now, Emma?" "It's about your parents," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. "They've completely overstepped their boundaries, and it has to stop. Today." Daniel rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just trying to help." "Help?" I shot back, incredulous. "Rearranging my kitchen, criticizing my parenting, barging into Noah's room. Does that sound like help to you?" "They're family," he said, his tone exasperated, like I was the one being unreasonable. "That doesn't give them the right to treat me like this," I snapped. "This is supposed to be our home, Daniel. Mine, yours, and Noah's, not theirs." Before he could respond, Linda appeared in the doorway, her presence as unwelcome as ever. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice sugary sweet but laced with venom. I turned to her, my patience wearing dangerously thin. "Yes, Linda." "There is. You've completely disrespected me and my home since the moment you arrived, and it's not okay." Linda laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that set my teeth on edge. "Emma, you're overreacting. We're just trying to make things easier for you. Clearly, you're struggling to manage everything on your own." I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. "Struggling. The only thing I'm struggling with is your constant interference." Daniel, clearly uncomfortable, shifted from one foot to the other. "Emma, can't we just talk about this later?" "No, Daniel. We're talking about it now," I said, my voice firm. "I've had enough. Either your parents leave or I do, and I'm taking Noah with me." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one said a word. Linda's smug expression faltered, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, her voice low and sharp. I met her gaze without flinching. "Watch me." That night, Linda and Roger packed their bags, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. As they walked out the door, Linda turned to give me one last venomous glare. "You'll regret this, Emma," she said, her voice dripping with malice. But as the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe again. Of course, things with Daniel were far from resolved. In the days that followed, he became distant, his interactions with me cold and curt. He barely looked at me when he was home, and when he did, it was with a resentment that hung heavy in the air. One evening, after putting Noah to bed, I found him in the living room, scrolling through his phone. "We need to talk," I said, sitting down across from him. "What now, Emma?" he asked, his tone flat and uninterested. "This isn't working," I said quietly. "You let your parents walk all over me, and now you're acting like I'm the problem. I can't live like this, Daniel." "I won't." He didn't say anything for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. Finally, he sighed. "I've got a business trip coming up. I'll be gone for a few weeks." "Fine," I replied, my voice tight. If he wanted to run away from this, that was on him. After he left, the house felt different, lighter, freer. It was like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for far too long. The first few days after Daniel left for his business trip were a breath of fresh air. Without Linda hovering or Daniel's cold shoulder, the house felt like mine again. I found myself undoing all the changes Linda had made, moving the furniture back, restoring my kitchen to the way I liked it, even rearranging Noah's room to feel cozy and familiar again. With each small act, I felt a little more like myself. It wasn't just about taking back my home. It was about reclaiming my confidence, my sense of peace, and my life. But that fragile peace didn't last. One evening, as I was tidying up the kitchen, I noticed Daniel's laptop sitting open on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. Privacy was something I valued, even if he hadn't shown me the same courtesy lately. But something about the way it was just sitting there, glowing softly in the dim light, drew me in. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the trackpad. Then, curiosity got the better of me. At first, it was nothing. Emails from work, a few calendar reminders, and notes about meetings. But then, buried in his inbox, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There it was, clear as day, messages between Daniel and another woman. They weren't vague or ambiguous, they were explicit, filled with promises of secret meetings, professions of love, and plans that had nothing to do with me. My hands shook as I scrolled through them, the words blurring together as anger, betrayal, and heartbreak swept over me like a tidal wave. He hadn't just let his parents disrespect me and invade my home. He'd been unfaithful, living a double life while I was here, holding our family together. I closed the laptop and sat down, my heart pounding in my chest. Tears threatened to spill, but I blinked them away. This wasn't the time to cry. This was the time to act. The next morning, I called a lawyer. My voice trembled as I explained everything: the intrusion of Daniel's parents, the emotional toll of their constant presence, and now the affair. Together, we began the process of filing for divorce and making sure Noah and I would be protected. Next, I reached out to a real estate agent. "I want to sell the house quickly and quietly," I told her. She hesitated. "Emma, are you sure? This is a big decision." "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied firmly. This house had been my sanctuary once, but now it was a prison, filled with memories of betrayal and pain. I needed a fresh start, a place where Noah and I could build a life free from Daniel and his family's toxicity. Offers came in quickly, and each one felt like a small victory. The thought of Daniel coming back to find the house sold and his control over my life gone filled me with a bittersweet sense of satisfaction. For the first time in years, I felt strong. In the weeks that followed, I leaned on the people who had always been there for me, my family. Reconnecting with them was like finding solid ground after years of walking on quicksand. When I told my parents everything, they were horrified. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" my mom asked, tears in her eyes. "I didn't know how," I admitted. "I didn't want to believe things had gotten this bad." "We're here for you, Emma," my dad said, his voice steady and reassuring. No matter what. Their support gave me the strength I desperately needed. I was no longer fighting this battle alone. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching Noah play in the yard, I made a silent vow to protect his happiness at all costs. No matter how difficult the road ahead, I was going to give him the life he deserved. A life filled with love, laughter, and security. The day Daniel returned loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. I had rehearsed the confrontation in my head so many times I felt like I could do it in my sleep. But when I heard his key in the lock and the door creak open, my heart still pounded like a drum. "Ava, I'm home," he called out casually, as if nothing had changed. I stepped out of the kitchen, my posture rigid, my face unreadable. "Welcome back, Daniel. We need to talk." He looked around, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the changes. The house no longer looked like the one he had left. The evidence of Linda's meddling was gone, replaced by my own touch. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice sharp. "The house looks different." "I sold it," I said simply, my tone even and calm. "It's no longer ours." His face twisted with disbelief. "You did what? You can't just sell our house without telling me." I met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "It's my house, Daniel, and after what I discovered, I don't think you have any say in the matter anymore." Confusion flickered across his face before turning to panic. "What are you talking about?" "The affair," I said coldly. "I know everything." For a moment he was silent, his face pale as the weight of my words sunk in. Then he scoffed, trying to brush it off. "Emma, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what it looks like," I snapped, my voice sharp but steady. "You betrayed me. You betrayed Noah. You betrayed our family." His panic morphed into anger, his face darkening. "You're overreacting. We can work through this." "There's no working through this, Daniel," I said firmly. "I've already filed for divorce." His jaw dropped, his bravado crumbling. "You can't be serious." I reached for the stack of papers on the counter and handed them to him. "I'm completely serious." The next few minutes were a blur of accusations, weak apologies, and desperate attempts to shift the blame, but I didn't waver. The man I had once loved, the man I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone selfish and unrecognizable. As he stormed out of the house, vowing to fight the divorce, I felt an odd mix of liberation and apprehension. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but I knew the battle was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from our separation rippled through our lives. The truth about Daniel's affair spread like wildfire, tarnishing his reputation. His parents, once so confident and overbearing, found themselves shunned by the same social circles they had always prided themselves on. They tried to reach out to me, but I refused to engage. My focus was on Noah and the legal proceedings, which moved forward with surprising speed. The day of the court hearing arrived with a weight I couldn't shake. As I sat across the courtroom from Daniel, I couldn't help but notice how defeated he looked. It was as if the weight of his actions had finally caught up to him. When the judge granted the divorce and awarded me custody of Noah, a sense of justice washed over me. After the hearing, Daniel tried to plead for reconciliation. "Emma, we can fix this," he said, his voice hollow. I looked at him, my tone devoid of emotion. "You made your choice, Daniel. Now you have to live with it." I turned and walked away, holding Noah's tiny hand in mine. The separation wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning. Life without Daniel felt like stepping into the light after years in darkness. The house was sold, and though it hurt to let go of a place I once loved, it no longer felt like home. Instead, I focused on rebuilding our lives. The coffee shop my family had nurtured for years became my sanctuary, a place where I found purpose and pride. Each morning, as the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, I felt a little more grounded. Noah thrived in the quieter, calmer environment. His laughter rang through our new home, a reminder of everything I was fighting for. Life after Daniel was quieter, but in the best possible way. Without the weight of his betrayal or the interference of his parents, I could finally breathe again. Noah and I had moved into a cozy little house on the other side of town. It wasn't as grand as the one I'd grown up in, but it was ours. A fresh start, free of toxic memories. The coffee shop became more than just a job. It was my sanctuary. Every morning, I unlocked the doors and let the warm aroma of roasted beans fill the space. Regulars started coming in not just for the coffee, but for the conversations, the smiles, and the sense of community I worked so hard to foster. But as much as I embraced the calm, the shadows of the past occasionally tried to creep back in. One evening, as I was locking up the shop, I heard a familiar voice. "Emma." I turned to see Daniel standing there. He looked nothing like the confident man I had married. His suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, and his expression one of pure desperation. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I need to talk to you," he said, his tone almost pleading. "It's about the alimony and child support. I can't afford it. My job—" I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Stop right there, Daniel. Your choices put you here, not me. Noah and I aren't going to suffer because of your mistakes." His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he looked utterly defeated. "I lost everything because of the scandal," he admitted, his voice trembling. "And my parents, they're broke too. I have nothing left." I crossed my arms, my expression neutral. "That's not my problem, Daniel. You made your choices and now you have to live with the consequences." His voice cracked as he tried again. "Emma, I'm sorry. For everything. I was a fool, and I ruined it all. Please, for old time's sake." For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity. His voice sounded raw, almost human, and I saw a glimpse of the man I had once loved. But then the memories came rushing back. The lies, the betrayal, the nights I cried myself to sleep while he lived his double life. "Old time's sake?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "Those times are gone, Daniel. You should have thought about the consequences before you cheated, before you lied." I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me. "Please, Emma. I have nothing left." I paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then I turned back to him, my expression calm but resolute. "I'm sorry too, Daniel, but I can't help you. You need to figure this out on your own." I walked away, leaving him standing there, a shadow of the man he used to be. The weeks that followed felt lighter, freer. Daniel's desperate pleas faded into the background, just like the rest of his family. My focus stayed on Noah and the future we were building together. Noah grew a little more every day. His laughter echoed through our home, filling the space with joy. I found peace in the small moments, watching him play with his toys, reading him bedtime stories, and hearing his little voice call me Mommy. The coffee shop flourished, becoming a hub for friends and neighbors. Each day, I saw new faces alongside familiar ones. The warmth of the shop felt like a reflection of the life I was rebuilding, a life filled with hope and strength. As for Daniel and his parents, they became distant memories. Their absence wasn't just a relief. It was a reminder of how far I'd come. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Noah held my hand, his tiny fingers warm against mine. "Ready to go home, buddy?" I asked with a smile. He nodded, his eyes lighting up. "Yeah, Mommy." As we walked down the quiet street, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The road ahead wasn't entirely clear, but it was mine to choose. Together, Noah and I were moving forward, stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing for certain: we were free. And nothing would hold us back again. Story 2. This narrative has a title. Because her daughter babysits, yet she is the one who is violent, my late wife's sister-in-law phoned the police to accuse me of leaving my son. Hello, everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Reddit. My late wife's SL contacted the police to accuse me of leaving my son behind since her daughter watches my son. But it turns out that she is the one who is abusing him. In fact, I was introduced to Reddit by her daughter Anna, who instructed me to post our tale there. Here it is. I'm 42 years old, and my wife passed away during delivery a year ago. We had been together for more than 8 years, and she was the love of my life. I was devastated by her passing, but I had to gather myself for our son. The only thing I have left of her is him. And while my late wife's family helped out after her death, which I valued, I would stop at nothing to provide him the life she would have desired. In particular, her parents have been wonderful, letting my kid take care of me on the weekends so I can relax. However, Rachel is her sister-in-law. That is a whole other matter. Rachel has never been easy. Even when my wife was still living, drama and control were things that Rachel thrived on. Anna, her daughter, is now 18. However, Anna never had an easy childhood. Every time we went to Rachel's house or had family get-togethers, I could see it. Rachel constantly yelled at Anna, called her derogatory names, and blamed her for the smallest things, treating her like a bother. Rachel would yell at Anna for being worthless if she spilled a drink. Rachel consistently dismissed my wife and I when we attempted to intervene, even though we detested witnessing it. I began assisting Anna whenever I could as the years went by. Was Rachel being too severe? I divert her attention with a pretext to diffuse the situation. My wife and I were available to Anna if she needed someone to talk to or assistance with school. To give her a respite from her mother, we would invite her to join us for dinner or on family outings. My wife would constantly say, "That girl deserves so much better," because she was so protective of Anna. She was also correct. Here's the problem, though. Rachel detested it. Anna would behave worse each time we intervened to assist her. We would be accused of spoiling Anna or undermining her parental authority. When Anna was around 14, we gave her a new school backpack for Christmas because her old one was breaking. Rachel yelled at us in front of everyone, claiming that she ought to have earned a new bag. Don't give her the impression that life is simple. It was absurd. Anna wasn't even allowed to keep it. We found out later. After my wife died, she threw it away. Things got even harder. Anna began to visit more frequently, which I found acceptable. She loved spending time with my son, and honestly, I think being around him gave her a sense of peace she didn't have at home. But Rachel saw it as an opportunity to meddle. It started small. Rachel would make snide comments about how I couldn't possibly raise a baby on my own. "A boy needs a mother," she'd say, as if I didn't already feel the weight of my wife's absence, every single day. Then she'd shift her focus to Anna, claiming I was taking advantage of her by letting her help out with the baby. The irony. Anna wanted to help. She'd light up whenever she was holding my son or playing with him. It was like she finally had a space where she wasn't being yelled at or criticized. One day, during a family dinner at her parents' house, Anna mentioned she was looking for a job. She wanted to start earning her own money and gain some independence from her mom. That's when it hit me. I needed help with my son, and Anna needed work. It seemed like the perfect solution. When I asked Anna if she'd be interested in babysitting for me, her face lit up. "Really? You trust me with him?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. Of course I trusted her. She'd practically been a second sister to my son already, and she was great with kids. I offered her the job on the spot, and she said yes without hesitation. Rachel's reaction, though. Oh, she lost it when I brought it up to her. Thinking she'd be thrilled Anna had found job, she went off. "She's too young to take on that type of responsibility," she snapped. "And what makes you think you can just draw her into your disaster of a life?" I was astonished. "It's simply babysitting," I told her. "Anna wants the job, and I need the aid. It's a win-win." But Rachel wasn't having it. She accused me of manipulating Anna, saying I was using her as a replacement for my wife. "You're just dumping your baby on her because you can't handle being a father," she sneered. It was offensive, not just to myself, but also to Anna. She gave the impression that Anna was incapable of making her own decisions, treating her more like a defenseless kid than the responsible, mature adolescent I knew her to be. A few days later, Anna began watching me, in spite of Rachel's objections. And that changed the game, I tell you. My son loved her. Every time she came through the door, he would clap his hands and grin. For the first time since my wife's death, Anna helped me work more hours, pay my expenses, and even sleep through the night without worrying about my kid all the time. Rachel wasn't finished, but I felt like I could breathe. She became openly hostile after being passive-aggressive. She would unexpectedly arrive at my place and make disparaging remarks about how my house wasn't kid-friendly or how Anna was spending too much time there. She would gripe about my cooking's odor. Yes, I do prepare spicy meals, handle it, and pretend that by providing Anna a job, I was somehow destroying her life. What was worse was how Rachel's actions began to impact Anna. She became quieter and more reclusive than normal, I noted. She once arrived with a red mark on her arm. She dismissed it as inconsequential when I questioned her about it. Mom simply became agitated, but it wasn't nothing. Her eyes showed it to me. Living with someone who treated her like an annoyance for years had worn her out and degraded her. When Anna arrived to my door weeping one evening, it all came to a head. She was utterly afraid, and her face was damaged and her lip was split. "Can I spend tonight here?" Her question was hardly audible above a whisper. I was booted out by Mom. It crushed my heart. I allowed her in, of course. She could stay as long as she needed to, I said, setting her up on the couch. I prepared breakfast the following morning and headed to work as normal. I told her to contact me if she needed anything, and that I would be back by late afternoon. She nodded and smiled slightly at me. I believed that everything was in order. I assumed I'd settle with Rachel when I came home because Anna was supposed to babysit that day anyhow. It seemed to me like a normal mother-daughter dispute that had gotten out of hand. I didn't know what was going to happen. My phone buzzed as I was working and sifting through a mountain of emails. Anna was the one. That wasn't out of the ordinary. If she needed assistance or had questions regarding my son, she would text me. It wasn't a text, though. Someone called, and I knew something wasn't right as soon as I responded. She spoke haltingly, hardly raising her voice above a whisper. "Would you just come home? It's not good. What's the matter?" "Anna, is the infant doing well?" With my heart pounding, I inquired. "He's all right," she responded hastily. However, I could detect the fear in her tone. "It's my mother. She arrived here. Now she's gone. But will you please simply return home?" I didn't require any additional information. "In 15 minutes, I'll be there," I said, reaching for my keys immediately. The first thing I saw when I arrived at my flat made me stop dead in my tracks. The front entrance was partially open, and the interior of the building appeared to have been struck by a tornado. They flipped over furniture. My son's toys were all over the place, and picture frames were broken. As I moved farther inside, my heart fell. Anna was embracing her knees while seated on the floor next to the couch. Her hair was unkempt, and her face looked pallid. She seems to have been through a lot. In his playpen was my son. Fortunately uninjured, he was whining and obviously upset by the commotion. "Anna?" I knelt beside her and spoke quietly. "What took place?" She gave me a glance. She was weeping, and her eyes were swollen and red. "She arrived here." Her voice wavered as she spoke. She lost it when she discovered that I was staying here in some way. I brushed off the glass fragments first and assisted Anna up so she could sit on the couch. She tried to stabilize herself by taking a trembling breath. "She has been making inquiries." Anna's voice faltered as she started. "She visited my friends' homes, my favorite coffee shop, and even the library. She was attempting to determine my whereabouts. She must have heard that I was present." She stopped and wiped her tears. "Perhaps an hour after you left, she arrived. I didn't open the door at first, but she insisted on shouting and banging, claiming to be aware of my presence. I opened the door so she wouldn't wake the infant. Already incensed at the idea of Rachel arriving up without permission, I balled my fists, not to mention what happened thereafter. She began to yell at me. Anna persisted in calling me a traitor and accusing me of being foolish and unappreciative for remaining here. She became much more irate when I informed her that I would not be returning with her. I resisted her attempt to pull me out by grabbing my arm. Anna's hands were shaking when she gazed down at them. She began tossing stuff at that point. She shattered a light and toppled the coffee table. She took a photo of you from the wall and flung it across the room. She had lost her mind. How about you? Observing the bruise developing on her arm, I questioned her softly. Have you been harmed by her? After hesitating, Anna nodded. She shoved me as I attempted to stop her from smashing additional things. I struck the wall rather forcefully. She insisted that I return home by tonight or else. Otherwise, then she simply bounded off. Otherwise? What? My voice was harsher than I meant when I asked. Tears sprang to Anna's eyes. She didn't only suggest that I would regret not coming home. I inhaled deeply in an attempt to quiet the roaring emotional storm inside of me. Anger, be concerned. Everything was too much. I glanced back at Anna after scanning the recreation area. She appeared so little and dejected, as though she had been bearing the weight of the world for years. You won't return there? I spoke aggressively. Anna gave a headshake. But if I don't, you won't return there. I interrupted her and repeated, this is where you're staying. As well as tomorrow, we will be visiting the cops. Anna's eyes were wide with confusion and worry as she gazed at me. The police? What if I'm not believed by them? What if they believe I'm exaggerating? Hold on, she's my mom. Ultimately, she was obviously in a panic. The poor girl. They'll accept your story. My voice was steady as I spoke. And I'll make them if they don't. Anna, she must stop doing this. Did she cause you pain? She threatened you and destroyed my house. That's sufficient. Anna remained silent for a minute. She then gave a nod. She retaliated, her lips quivering. Tears again. All right, she muttered. I cleaned up the mess Rachel left behind for the remainder of the night. Each shattered item and toppled piece of furniture served as a reminder of the lengths Rachel would go to in order to keep Anna under control. However, I refused to let her prevail. Not now. The following morning began rather quietly. As I departed for work, Anna seemed nervous but resolute. I will return shortly. In an attempt to reassure her, I informed her. Call me if something goes wrong. She managed a little grin as she nodded, but it was clear to me that she was still disturbed from the previous evening. Rachel was looming over her like a rain cloud, telling her to get home by nightfall. My phone rang just as I was starting work. I didn't recognize the number. I would normally disregard it, but I felt compelled to respond. Officer Bradley from the local police department is here. Is this Alex? On the other end, the voice inquired. I felt sick to my stomach. Yes, I am this person. What's happening? I stumbled. A report on your youngster has reached us. We've arrived at your house. You must return home right away. His voice was harsh as he spoke. We'll get in touch with Child Protective Services if you don't. My heart stopped. I swear, my son, CPS. What on earth was happening? I didn't even request specifics. Leaving my laptop and half a cup of coffee behind, I just grabbed my keys and ran out of the office. A police vehicle was parked outside my apartment as I pulled there. Running up the stairs made my stomach spin. There were 2 cops standing in my living room, and the entrance to my flat was ajar. One was clutching my youngster, who appeared frightened. His little hands gripped the clothing of the officer. Tears were streaming down his crimson cheeks. What on earth is happening? I grabbed for my son and made a demand, attempting to speak steadily. Are you the father? I nodded, and the cop with my son asked. He returned him to me. Although it was fleeting, the comfort of having my kid in my arms was immense. It was reported to us that you left your youngster unattended at home. With a solemn, even accusing attitude, the second officer spoke. What? That is untrue. My babysitter is here, Anna, I remarked. She is now observing him. The cop looked from me to his buddy and back again. Anna has been contacted. She claims to be your nanny. However, according to her mother, you've been treating her like a surrogate mother for your child, and that she felt compelled to be in this circumstance. What? I was taken aback. That is absurd. Anna consented to watch the kids. She's excellent at it and has been doing it for months. She has never mentioned feeling uneasy, and I give her a fair wage. Before the police could react. From the corridor, I recognized the voice. He's telling lies. Like a dagger, Rachel's high-pitched voice sliced through the atmosphere. She barged inside the flat. Anger made her cheeks flush. My daughter has been treated like his wife or something, and he has been utilizing her as free labor. This is mistreatment. I was utterly shocked when I looked at her. Are you serious now? I fired back. My babysitter is Anna, that's all. She desired the position. She needs the cash. Rachel glared at me while crossing her arms. She is 18. While you're out doing whatever it is you're doing, she shouldn't be trapped home parenting your child. Rachel refused to listen to the cops' attempts to defuse the situation. She persisted in accusing me of exploiting Anna, saying that I was doing so because I was unable to care for my own kid. She even dared to say that since I wasn't suitable to be a parent, CPS should take over. Even though I knew that shouting wouldn't help, my blood was boiling. The living room is equipped with cameras. I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. Everything is recorded. I can provide you with evidence that I have done nothing illegal. After exchanging glances, the policeman nodded. Okay. One of them said, let's examine. I escorted them to my PC and retrieved the video. I fumbled through the folders with trembling hands. I started by showing them the video from that morning. It featured Anna preparing breakfast, playing with my kid, and even cleaning up after herself. Nothing unusual. I then played the video from last night. Anna was seen coming to my door. Her face was smeared with tears and wounded. She was heard on the recording stating, "Mom kicked me out. Can I spend tonight here?" And my reply, "You can sleep on the couch, of course." While the video aired, the police remained mute. Meanwhile, Rachel was furious. "This proves nothing," she yelled. "He's just showing you the things he wants you to see." As I scrolled to the segment of the video from earlier that day, I exclaimed, "Hold on. What you must see is this." Rachel broke into my flat while I was at work, as captured on camera. She was shouting at Anna to get out of there. "I can't leave," Anna stated in a trembling but determined voice. I am observing the infant. The thing that made my stomach turn was next. Rachel let out a shriek. "That kid isn't important to me. I don't care if he cries himself to death." There was silence in the room. The police themselves were surprised. They turned to Rachel, one of them. "What are your thoughts on this, ma'am?" Rachel's cheeks flushed. "She is my daughter," she yelled. "I have every right to rescue her from this situation. I was asked whether I wanted to file charges by the police. I did, damn it." She was informed by one of the cops that it is illegal to break into someone's house, ma'am. Additionally, your actions today have endangered this youngster. "You will have to be taken into custody," Rachel snapped. As the cops placed her in handcuffs, she began to scream and flail. "My life is being ruined by you," she yelled at me. "CPS will take the child away from you because you are a bad father." I was both relieved and worn out as they led her away. The mayhem, however, was far from ended. Later that night, Anna returned. She sobbed because she was upset that I had her mother detained. "It was not necessary for you to travel so far," she shouted. "Whatever she did, she is still my mother." "Anna," I attempted to explain, "I took this action to keep my son safe. Your mother placed him in danger when she broke into my house. She wasn't listening, though. You have no idea how this will affect my family." She yelled and rushed away. I was exhausted as I sat on the couch with my son sleeping in my arms. Even though I knew I had done the right thing, I still felt guilty. Had I just exacerbated the situation? The hours following Rachel's arrest passed quickly. As I held my kid close and watched him slumber in my arms, I attempted to figure out what in the world had occurred. The nagging sense that this was far from finished soon overcame the comfort of knowing Rachel could no longer harm us. I woke up the following morning to a barrage of text messages and missed calls. Rachel's arrest had quickly become public knowledge. The majority of the responses were less friendly, but some, like the one from my neighbor Mrs. Henderson, who wrote that it was time for someone to confront her, were encouraging. Like vultures, Rachel's relatives had pounced on the matter, accusing me of exaggerating the problem and causing their family to fall apart. "Why would you arrest Rachel?" I read one text. All she was doing was attempting to protect her daughter. "Her life didn't have to be ruined by you." "You're nasty," another one remarked plainly. I gazed at my mobile device. I have a knot in my gut. Although I had anticipated criticism, it all seemed much worse after reading it in writing. Anna's Aunt Rachel called me later that day. "Sister?" She was furious. "You had no right to call the police, and I'm not sure what your issue is." Before I could even say hi, she shouted. All Rachel was attempting to do was keep her daughter from working too much. "This is 100 times worse because of you." I tried not to panic. She broke into my home. I spoke aggressively. She put my son's safety in danger. What should I have done? Let her get away with it, please. There was a little change in her tone, but the wrath remained. "You have no idea how difficult this is for Anna. You've placed her in a precarious situation. She is now caught between you and her mother. Are you even concerned about the harm this is causing her?" It was a powerful blow. Anna was important to me. I detested the fact that she had to deal with all of this. However, what option did I have? Rachel had gone too far. Actually, there were a number, and I wasn't going to allow her behavior to go unchallenged. By the course of the week, it became evident that the neighborhood was split by Rachel's arrest. Some of my neighbors completely ignored me, avoiding eye contact when I walked by. As I passed with my son, a man I hardly knew murmured something like "troublemaker" under his breath. I felt like I had a bullseye on my back when I was out and about. The worst were the whispers. As I walked to my car or put out the garbage, I would overhear brief chats. "That unfortunate girl is being used by him like a maid," I've heard. To her companion, one lady remarked, "Is it unbelievable that he actually contacted the police to report Rachel for babysitting?" I tried to ignore it, but it wasn't easy, another person added. Every look, every whispered remark was like a dagger. It seemed like half the neighborhood believed I was the culprit, even though I knew what Rachel had done was terrible. The fact that Anna had vanished didn't help. I hadn't heard from her since the night she stormed out, and she wasn't babysitting any longer. I made the decision to get in touch with Anna a week after the incident. In addition to not wanting to push her, I also didn't want to leave the matter unattended. I texted her, "Hello, Anna. I hope all is well with you. If you want to chat, I'm available." Hours passed with no answer. I made an effort to concentrate on my work and looking after my baby, but my thoughts kept returning to Anna. What was she contemplating? Was she all right? I detested the idea that she would feel as though she could no longer reach me. My phone chimed late that night at last. Anna was the one. Her message was succinct and direct. "I'm all right. I'm now staying with my aunt. Don't get in touch with me again, please." I tightened my chest as I gazed at the television. It was like losing her again, even though I wanted to honor her desires. Although I was aware that she was overburdened by everything, I was baffled by her behavior. I know she's gone through a lot, and I truly wanted to assist her, despite the fact that her mother mistreated her. Anna was beyond of grasp. I concentrated on keeping my son safe and going on, but I couldn't get rid of the sensation that Rachel wasn't finished, so I dug further. I asked questions, spoke with neighbors, and gathered together facts. What I discovered just reaffirmed my long-held suspicions. Long before this, Rachel's behavior had been problematic. I was informed by a neighbor that she had witnessed Anna being shut out of the house on many occasions, standing on the doorstep in tears while Rachel yelled at her from inside. According to another, Rachel had a reputation for losing her temper and screaming at anybody who crossed her. For years, she has been that way. According to the woman, Anna had to cope with that all of her life. Then there were the money problems. As it turns out, Rachel had a history of borrowing money and using other people's names, including those of her brothers, her ex-husband, and even Anna. A neighbor said that she had heard Rachel and a landlord argue angrily over due rent. That one is a piece of work. The neighbor shook her head in agreement. It was upsetting and affirming to hear all of this. Rachel was more than simply a challenging individual. She was poisonous, and for years, Anna had been stuck in that setting. I was even more convinced that filing charges had been the appropriate move. I was concerned about Anna, though. The legal side of things began to gain up steam as the days stretched into weeks. Rachel's court date was drawing near after she was accused of trespassing and filing a fake complaint. My lawyer informed me that the camera evidence would strengthen our case, and I had already provided the police with my statement. However, that didn't make things any simpler. The turmoil in the household was also becoming worse. In a fit of rage, Rachel's siblings accused me of ruining her life and turning the family against her. Despite their best efforts to remain impartial, my late wife's parents were obviously unhappy with the entire scenario. The court date came sooner than I thought. Holding on to my lawyer's notes like a lifeline, I stood in the courthouse corridor. The notion of what was at risk made my stomach turn. Not just for myself, but also for my kid and Anna. We all had to deal with the fallout from Rachel's actions, which had upended our lives. It was a small but anxious courtroom. Smug as ever, Rachel sat with her lawyer. She gave me a single look, grinning as if she believed this was all a game. She was going to prevail. My attorney got off to a great start by introducing the security footage. The video did the talking. Rachel repeatedly broke into my apartment, yelled at Anna, and stated unequivocally that she didn't give a damn whether my son was left alone. Rachel's attorney attempted to twist it by saying that Rachel had been behaving in a way that showed care for Anna's welfare. He claimed that my client was only attempting to shield her daughter from an abusive circumstance. However, when Anna was asked to testify, things took a different turn. As she mounted the stand, my heart wrenched since I hadn't seen her in weeks. Her hands were shaking as she adjusted the microphone, and she appeared anxious. Her eyes, however, had a resolve that had never been there before. "Anna," the judge said, "could you explain your experience working for the plaintiff and your connection with Rachel, the defendant?" Slowly, Anna nodded. At first, her voice was shaky. "My mom is Rachel," she added. "Additionally, I've been watching Alex's kids for a few months." She was then questioned on her mother-daughter relationship. Anna paused, looking quickly at Rachel. I thought Anna may freeze for a second as her mother's face tightened. However, she inhaled deeply before saying something that caused the room to become quiet. She acknowledged that it wasn't excellent. "My mother gets angry easily. She frequently screams and occasionally becomes aggressive. I had previously had to leave the house because I didn't feel secure." "That's a lie!" Rachel yelled right away. But after giving her a severe warning, the judge hushed her. Anna went on, her voice growing louder. "After a fight that evening, she beat me and threw me out. Since I had nowhere else to go, I went to Alex's place. I slept on the couch because he allowed me. There was nothing wrong with him. He was only attempting to assist." More information emerged as Anna talked. She described how she had been locked out of the house more times than she could remember, how Rachel had taken out credit cards in her name without her consent, and how Rachel continuously denigrated her, calling her a burden and useless. The only sound in the courtroom was Anna's voice. Rachel's family, who had been steadfastly supporting her until now, was uncomfortable as well. They seemed to be witnessing a side of Rachel that they had been unwilling to recognize. The judge gave Anna a warm glance when she was done. "I appreciate your candor," he remarked. "Speaking up like that requires a great deal of bravery." It didn't take the judge long to decide. Rachel was convicted of inflicting emotional distress, creating a fake police complaint, and trespassing. She was given a community service term and mandated to compensate Anna and myself for our losses. Additionally, CPS said that they were beginning an official inquiry into her parenting. When the judgment was being read, at last, Rachel's arrogant face broke. No one was listening anymore when she yelled that it wasn't fair and that all she was doing was trying to be a decent mother. There was no way to hide the truth now that it was out. My door was knocked on a week after Rachel was arrested. Anna stood there when I opened it. Although she appeared exhausted, her eyes were less hazy with rage. "May I enter?" With hesitation, she asked. "Naturally," I said, moving aside. The couch where she had spent the night was where she sat down. She was briefly booted out by Rachel. We both remained silent. She then inhaled deeply before speaking. "I apologize," she replied softly, "for leaving, for shouting at you. I didn't know what to do since I was so afraid and perplexed." "You don't need to say sorry," I said. "You've experienced a lot. Just checking in to see how you're doing." With her fingers twitching uneasily in her lap, Anna nodded. "Since the arrest, I have been residing with my aunt. Even though it's calmer and better, I can't stop thinking about my mother and all that occurred." "You're not accountable for her," I said softly. "You have the right to live your life free from her tyranny and terror." Anna cast her gaze downward. Her voice wavered. I am aware. And I believe I'm beginning to understand how terrible that was. For as long as I can remember, she has been this way. But I always assumed it would be typical. I could have earned it. My chest constricted. Anna, you deserved none of it. You are not to blame for any of this. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded once more. Finally, I guess I believe that, and you're to blame. When I was unable to confront her, you did. You prevented her from winning. Rachel's life started to fall apart as the days stretched into weeks. The bank documents, years of abuse and neglect, and everything else were discovered during the CPS inquiry into her parenting. In the end, the court decided that Rachel was not qualified to take custody of Anna. Her rights as a parent were taken away. Soon after, she left the community, leaving behind the devastation she had caused. Anna started to flourish once Rachel left the picture. She began working part-time at a bookshop and enrolled in college. She frequently visited my kid, and their relationship only got closer. As I saw them interact, I was reminded of why I had worked so hard to assist Anna break free from the pattern of violence and to provide a loving, safe home for my kid. This past year has been too much for me. Losing my spouse, assuming the role of a single father, and attempting to shield Anna from a circumstance that nobody should ever have to deal with. There were times when I thought I was going to drown, as if I would be crushed by the weight of it all. Nevertheless, I persisted in moving forward for my kid and the life I had promised my wife I would provide him. All of you who are reading this are facing challenges in life by yourself. Just keep in mind that you are stronger than you realize. You're not by yourself, even if that's how it seems at times. Continue. Anna was standing there when it happened. Although she appeared exhausted, her eyes were less hazy with rage. May I enter? With hesitation, she asked. Naturally, I said, moving aside. The couch where she had spent the night was where she sat down. She was briefly booted out by Rachel. We both remained silent. She then inhaled deeply before speaking. I apologize, she replied softly, for leaving, for shouting at you. I didn't know what to do since I was so afraid and perplexed. You don't need to say sorry, I said. You've experienced a lot. Just checking in to see how you're doing. With her fingers twitching uneasily in her lap, Anna nodded. Since the arrest, I have been residing with my aunt. Even though it's calmer and better, I can't stop thinking about my mother and all that occurred. You're not accountable for her, I said softly. You have the right to live your life free from her tyranny and terror. Anna cast her gaze downward. Her voice wavered. I am aware, and I believe I'm beginning to understand how terrible that was. For as long as I can remember, she has been this way, but I always assumed it would be typical. I could have earned it. My chest constricted. Anna, you deserved none of it. You are not to blame for any of this. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded once more. Finally, I guess I believe that. And you're to blame. When I was unable to confront her, you did. You prevented her from winning. Rachel's life started to fall apart as the days stretched into weeks. The bank documents, years of abuse and neglect, and everything else were discovered during the CPS inquiry into her parenting. In the end, the court decided that Rachel was not qualified to take custody of Anna. Her rights as a parent were taken away. Soon after, she left the community, leaving behind the devastation she had caused. Anna started to flourish once Rachel left the picture. She began working part-time at a bookshop and enrolled in college. She frequently visited my kid, and their relationship only got closer. As I saw them interact, I was reminded of why I had worked so hard to assist Anna break free from the pattern of violence and to provide a loving, safe home for my kid. This past year has been too much for me. Losing my spouse, assuming the role of a single father, and attempting to shield Anna from a circumstance that nobody should ever have to deal with. There were times when I thought I was going to drown, as if I would be crushed by the weight of it all. Nevertheless, I persisted in moving forward for my kid and the life I had promised my wife I would provide him. All of you who are reading this are facing challenges in life by yourself. Just keep in mind that you are stronger than you realize. You're not by yourself, even if that's how it seems at times. Continue. Story 3. My affluent parents labeled me a burden, refused to cover my college expenses, and left me years later. Instead of trying to profit from my achievement, I filed a $3 million lawsuit against them and permanently terminated ties. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. My name is Josh, and I currently operate a profitable business at the age of 27. Life is good. However, I see how dysfunctional my childhood was when I reflect about it. Stephen and Diane, my parents, were the epitome of self-centeredness. They enjoyed more than simply their jobs. They had an obsession with them. My father was a devoted business advisor, always doing math and closing deals. Additionally, my mother operated a series of upscale stores, and the terms luxury and exclusive dominated her entire psyche. They seemed to have had all they needed. Here's the problem, though. They had no desire to have children. They didn't include me in their strategy. Their family's push to get married and start a family was the only reason I was born. They instantly regretted giving in and having me. They made no effort to conceal it. Do you know how many opportunities I missed because I had to be a mother? Was something Mom would remark. Or I would already be in charge of the West Coast fashion industry if I didn't have to deal with you. Dad was worse. He would glance at me and go, "Years have been lost because of you. We would have been so much further along if you hadn't been born." Yes, they did say such things directly to my face. It seemed like constant pain to grow up in that house. Their companies kept them busy all the time. In other words, I was essentially left to fend for myself if I needed homework assistance. They would dismiss me. "Consult your instructor," Mom would say, hardly raising her eyes from her computer, as well as Dad. He would grumble that he didn't have time for my little issues since he was busy establishing an empire. I would observe other children at school being picked up by their parents, who would inquire about their day or offer encouragement at special occasions. My folks, however, don't give a damn. They never attended a science fair, school play, or parent-teacher conference. It was total indifference, not only negligence, and they only gave me criticism when they actually listened to me. They never acknowledged the fact that I received consecutive A's in school. Rather, they would make fun of my interest in computers. With that, "What sort of job are you going to get?" At a mall, Mom would scowl while repairing laptops. "You're not cut out for the real world," Dad would chuckle. "You will never succeed." However, their treatment of me was the worst, as if I were the cause of their lack of achievement. They pretended that my presence had destroyed their lives. Whenever they got into a battle over business, it always came back to me. Mom would yell that I would have grown by now if I didn't need to waste time on Josh, and Dad would answer, "He wastes our resources. We ought to have followed the plan. No children. When you're a child, you don't really comprehend the problem. However, you sense it." I recall asking myself, why do they hate me so much? I blamed myself for it for years. That people may adore me if I were brighter, more athletic, or less strange. However, that did not occur. Around the age of 16 was the pivotal moment. My dad's younger sister, Aunt Laura, came to see us. She was one of the few relatives who could see behind my parents' flawless exterior. We had a great relationship, and I simply sobbed and told her everything one day, how I was treated by my parents, how they never helped me, how they held me responsible for their failures. Laura wasn't shocked. She really said something to me that really put things into perspective. "Your parents never wanted a child," she added. "Josh, only because of the constant pressure from their family did they have you. They have always been angry with you." It was a little painful to hear that. However, it also clarified things. I was not the target of their malice. They were the focus. Instead of seeing me as a person, they regarded me as a barrier. I stopped attempting to gain their favor after that. Why even bother? They would never approve of whatever I did. I began concentrating on myself instead. I pushed myself into my studies and began to consider how I might leave their home and start a new life. The problem is that I wasn't just ignored by my parents. They made a conscious effort to undermine me. They informed me they wouldn't cover tuition when I first started applying to institutions, even though they could easily afford it. I pleaded with them. This is my future. Dad, however, only chuckled. You've got no future. You'll wind up doing computer repair for minimal salary, he added. That was the final straw. I was aware that I couldn't depend on them. I would have to construct my own future if I want one. I had been saving money from odd jobs and teaching assignments by the time I was 17. I was resolved to escape, even though I knew it wouldn't be enough. My folks didn't give a damn. Indeed, they urged me to go as soon as I received my high school diploma. Mom smirked and replied, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." A few weeks before turning 18, I packed my things and moved in with Aunt Laura. She was not wealthy. Her modest apartment, where she worked in sales, seemed more like home than my parents' estate ever did. My parents never done what Laura did. Kindness. "I can't promise to fix everything, but I'll help you as much as I can," she replied, staring me in the eye when I first came. "You are no longer alone. And what do you know?" I genuinely felt like someone had my back for the first time in years. Choosing a college was the first challenge. I had been admitted to a respectable institution, but my parents had not provided any financial assistance. It was like climbing Everest without any equipment to pay for it. Aunt Laura started working right away. She didn't sit around and hope for miracles or moping. "We're going to apply for every scholarship grant and loan out there," she remarked as she seated me at her little dining table. "We're going to receive free money if it's available." It wasn't simple. Many scholarships required essays, interviews, or evidence of financial need, and the majority were extremely competitive. The writings were good. I could have written a best-selling memoir about my parents' abuse, but it was more difficult to persuade others that I deserved it. Even though my parents weren't giving me a thing, their income precluded me from several financial aid programs. Laura and I were filling out applications one day, and I recall it. "It's crazy how your parents' money counts against you when they're the last people who would actually help," she added, sighing as she examined one of the papers. She was not mistaken. I had the impression that the system was biased against me. I finally got a couple scholarships after weeks of preparing applications, getting references, and navigating the red tape. To my great relief, one of them paid for 80% of my tuition, the last 20%. Laura demanded that she cover it herself. I had a disagreement with her over it. She cut me off, even though I didn't want to be a burden. She said firmly, "Josh, it's not a hardship to help you. Living with Laura was more than simply a survival situation for your family. It was about healing, too." She didn't hesitate to criticize my parents' actions. For what purpose? It was violent. She would say things like, "Josh, you deserved better," or, "It's not normal for parents to treat their kid like a business liability, and it's acceptable to be enraged over it." I learned from those discussions that I wasn't the issue. They were the ones. I was working odd jobs to earn money for living expenses, while Laura helped me with my college-related tasks. I did everything from working the late shift at a nearby diner to teaching math students in high school. Even though it wasn't much, it felt fantastic to make my own money, even though it was tiring. I eventually began college and moved into the residence halls. A tiny room with flaking paint and a roommate who slept like a chainsaw was all that was glamorous. I didn't care, though. All that mattered was that I was finally free of my parents' shadow. I had trouble adjusting at first. College was overwhelming, and I often felt like I was falling behind when other students joined groups or went to parties. To make ends meet, I was doing part-time jobs. However, I gradually discovered my groove. I started making acquaintances, cultivated ties with my lecturers, and concentrated on my studies. Alex, a fellow computer science major who enjoyed coding and awful science fiction films as much as I did, was one of my first buddies. After late-night programming sessions and oily takeout, we became close, and Alex finally introduced me to his friends. These were not only classmates, they were more motivated, aspirational, and encouraging than I had ever encountered. We began generating project ideas over time. and one of those eventually evolved into the software business we currently operate. However, it was only a side gig at the time, a means of honing our craft and perhaps earning some additional money. We had no idea it would grow into anything significant. In the meantime, I had no contact with my parents, which was perfectly acceptable to me. They did not make a call. They showed little interest in what I was doing, and they didn't check in. I only learned about them via Laura, who would sometimes bring up their family rumors or social media postings. It seems that they were still living up to their ideal lifestyle. I occasionally went to party hangouts and pretended not to go because I missed them. I didn't. However, I was aware that they were most likely giving their pals a distorted account of the facts. They can remark, "We gave Josh everything, but he wanted to go his own way," or "Josh chose to leave." I was furious at the idea of their rewriting history in that way. I wanted to confront them and expose their deceit. Laura, however, consistently cautioned against it. She would say, "Josh, you're doing great on your own. Avoid letting them get you down." Things began to improve at the conclusion of my first year in college. I was doing quite well in my subjects. I felt like I had a purpose at last, and my side business was taking off. But the most crucial element, I demonstrated to myself that I was independent of my parents. Every accomplishment and advancement was solely me. The hardest choice of my life had been to leave their home. It was the greatest one, though. For the first time, their unrelenting negativity and criticism didn't hold me down, and I could be myself. I vowed to myself that year to keep them out of my life forever, regardless of my level of achievement or their efforts to wiggle their way back in. They would never be able to harm me again. In retrospect, I believe that choice. My healing really began when I decided to cut them out completely. My life had completely changed by the time I reached my final year of college. I was no longer merely getting by. I was doing well. With Alex and a couple of other pals, my side project had grown into something more. What had begun as a little software effort in our dorm rooms was becoming more and more popular. Businesses were taking notice of us, and we were receiving emails from clients looking to pay for our services. It seemed unreal. I recall the day we got our first significant customer. We were packed into Alex's little flat, surrounded by cans of Red Bull and empty pizza boxes. The mid-sized logistics firm that sent the email requested a customized solution to streamline their operations. The agreement: $50,000. For a minute, we all simply sat there and gazed at the television. Then Alex yelled, "We're doing this!" and leaped to his feet. The pivotal moment was the transaction. After formally registering our business, we were managing several clients in a matter of months. Naturally, things weren't always easy. It was draining to juggle part-time work and education with the company's increasing expectations. There were times when I was so high on excitement and coffee that I hardly slept. However, I felt as though I was creating something significant for the first time in my life. Something I owned. To be honest, I was relieved that I didn't hear from my parents at this period. Every now and again, Laura brought them up casually. For example, when they hosted a lavish gala or gave a sizable gift to a nearby charity in exchange for media attention. However, except in that, they had little influence on my life. Graduation followed. Not only was I graduating, the valedictorian was me. I had been dreaming about that moment for years. I felt validated for everything I had gone through as I stood on that platform, spoke, and looked out at the audience. Laura was in the first row, and I made sure of it. She was beaming from ear to ear and virtually jumping in her chair. Seeing her proud made the occasion even more special, because she had supported me through everything. Guess who nevertheless chose to ruin the celebration? Yes, Diane and Stephen. They didn't get in touch with me first, didn't inquire as to whether I wanted them there. They simply arrived. I saw them socializing with other parents, as if they were a part of the festivities outside the auditorium. I took a moment to take in what I was witnessing. They were all decked out. Dad in a suit that most likely cost more than my tuition, and Mom wearing one of her fancy gowns. I pretended not to see them as I went right by them on my way inside. I refused to let them spoil my day. I wanted to rejoice with Laura and my friends after the wedding, but they were there as soon as I went outdoors. Mom was beaming and beckoned me over as if we were best friends. "There you are, Josh, sweetheart." I wasn't even trying to disguise how annoyed I was. "Why are you here?" I inquired. Mom's smile wavered, then swiftly returned. "We wish to be present on your special day. The family is really pleased of this occasion." "Family?" I nearly laughed when she used that term with such bravado. Dad added his voice. "The valedictorian is you. That is a tremendous accomplishment. We wouldn't be missing it at all." I gazed at them for a while, attempting to determine if they were merely self-centered or suffering from delusions. Most likely both. "You were unaware that I was valedictorian. You're not here because you care about me," I said, "but rather because it suits you." That struck a chord. Dad's cheeks flushed, and Mom's smile disappeared entirely. He responded, "That's not true," but his tone lacked conviction. "Really? You told me I had no future the last time I saw you, so I shot back. You refused to assist me with college and threw me out, and now you're proud. Parents, don't hurt me." Laura intervened at that moment, perhaps noticing that I was only 2 seconds away from causing a commotion. "Josh," she murmured softly, "together with your buddies, let's go celebrate." They stood there looking startled as I pivoted on my heel and left. Laura, Alex, and the rest of my pals joined me in celebrating that evening. We went out for drinks, drank to the future, and laughed till our sides ached. My folks. They weren't finished, but I didn't think about them again. They made an effort to get in touch throughout the next weeks. In addition to leaving voicemails and emails, they also sent a handwritten letter, an idea that was undoubtedly Mom's. In all of them, Dad wouldn't bother. They stated that all they wanted was to get back in touch and reunite as a family. I didn't believe it. All my life, they had made it quite evident that I was only a bother to them. They wanted to get back in now that I was successful. Yes. No. I ignored them at first, but they began to show more confidence. A common family acquaintance once sent me a message congratulating me on my accomplishment and expressing how happy my parents were. They had apparently been telling people that they had always been there for me and had played a big part in my success. The final straw was that. I just emailed them once. "Don't get in touch with me again. I'm finished." I made sure they were totally cut off after that. No emails, no phone calls. They have no prospect of getting involved in my life. In retrospect, that was one of the most significant times in my life. I came to see that success is more than just accomplishments. It all depends on the people you choose to spend time with. My true family consisted of my friends, my aunt, and the group I formed with Alex. Diane, Anne, and Steve. They were just random people who just so happened to have my DNA. I believed that I was at last independent of my parents. I relocated to a different city after graduating. I opened my business with my partners and began working on expanding it. At last, everything in life was coming together. Laura and I continued to be close. My business was growing, and my friends became like family. Naturally, though, Stephen and Diane were unable to remain in my life for very long. It began with an arbitrary phone call. Since I didn't have the number stored on my phone, I nearly didn't answer, but I felt compelled to call Josh. Diane's voice, brimming with phony warmth, said, "It's your mother." Her tone immediately reminded me of every manipulative conversation we'd ever had, even though I hadn't heard from her in over a year. "What are you looking for?" I asked bluntly. "We have heard about your company. You seem to be doing very well," she said. I allowed her to go on, even though I could sense where this was going. With a tone reminiscent of her attempts to sell an idea she knew would fail, she said, "Your father and I have been thinking. We want to put money into your business. There is so much we could contribute. Financial support, guidance, and connections. We all have the ideal chance here." I couldn't contain my laughter. "You must be joking with me," I said. She answered in a defensive tone, "No, we're serious. Since you have demonstrated your abilities, we believe it is time to move past the past and work as a family. We have always believed in your ability. For me, it was it. Do you wish to collaborate as a family?" With a stern voice, I said, "When I was applying to colleges, where was that enthusiasm? Or when I was living in my dorm on ramen, because you declined to assist, The only reason you're interested now is because you believe you can profit from me," Diane stammered as she tried to think of an excuse, but I ended the call before she could say anything else. I should have known better than to assume that would be the end of it. I woke up to a complete mess the next day. Messages from Alex and my other business partners were flooding my phone. They had all seen the same thing: a Facebook post from my parents that tagged not just me, but also my business and all of its employees. It was a masterwork of deception and deceit. They said I was a scammer, that I had cut them out of my life after utilizing their money to advance in my career, and that my business only existed because of their kind financial assistance. Because they tagged my clients, business partners, and even some of our investors, they gave the impression that I was a pampered brat who had abandoned those who had given me everything. The post quickly gained popularity. Comments began to flood in, enraged at individuals as well. It was a dress for my livelihood or challenging my business, not just a way to acquire money for growing things. To enhance their own egos, they were dragging my narrative through the dirt. I knew I had to reply once I collected myself, and Alex persuaded me not to throw my phone out the window, but I didn't want to go to their lengths and start a heated debate on Facebook. I don't work that way. Rather, I chose to let the facts do the talking. The thing is, this. When I was still living with my parents, I had receipts. I began filming films of their actions. Initially, I only did it to keep myself sane and to remind myself that their actions and words weren't typical. However, as time passed, I came to see that those recordings may serve as my defense if I ever had to demonstrate how terrible they were. I had video of Stephen telling me I would never amount to anything, Diane scolding me for wanting to go to college, and both of them candidly stating they wished I had never been born. I shared those videos and a thorough essay outlining the truth about my relationship with my parents on my public Instagram account. I said that they didn't want me at all, how they were attempting to take advantage of my accomplishments after evicting me when I turned 18. I didn't embellish, but I also didn't hold back. The fact alone was devastating enough. The reaction was tremendous. The post became viral within hours. People were spreading it, criticizing my parents for their falsehoods, and leaving comments in shock. The discourse quickly changed in tone. All of a sudden, everyone supported me. However, the consequences for Diane and Stephen were severe. They began to distance themselves from their friends, co-workers, and even clients. Laura informed me that the outcry was so severe that Mom was forced to delete her boutique's social media accounts due to the deluge of hate mail. Excellent. But I wasn't finished yet. I spoke with Sarah, my attorney, and gave her the rundown. After glancing over the Facebook post, she declared that it was defamatory. "We intend to file a lawsuit." Sarah was not a fool. She submitted the papers in a matter of days, pointing out the damage to my business as well as my personal reputation. The rest of the crew, including Alex, was totally on board. They had personally witnessed the effects, as investors hesitated to proceed and clients withdrew from transactions. My parents were terrified when they received the lawsuit. Diane left me a string of frantic voicemails that alternated between irate accusations and heartfelt apologies. Naturally, Stephen decided to be stern and left a single note that said, "Josh, you're making a big mistake. It won't work out well for you." "Yes, Father, since you have such a strong record of making accurate forecasts." I didn't answer. I let Sarah take care of everything, while I concentrated on repairing the harm to my company. My colleagues and I personally contacted each client and investor, outlining the circumstances and presenting evidence of the truth. Although it took a lot of effort, it was worthwhile. Most of the confidence we had lost had been restored by the end of the week. On the other side, my parents were beginning to see how badly they had miscalculated. When my parents were slammed by the lawsuit, they didn't just go insane, they were no longer strategic. They went into full pandemonium mode rather than keeping quiet or employing a competent attorney to handle things discreetly. In an attempt to portray themselves as the victims, they began phoning every member of the family and sobbing about how I was ruining their lives. The irony, most of these relatives had not been contacted in years. All of a sudden, Stephen and Diane began contacting everyone, even my mom's estranged sister and distant relatives, to beg for pity. In an attempt to persuade Aunt Laura to withdraw the lawsuit, they even had the gall to phone her. Laura, being the fierce woman that she is, put an end to them right now. She made it clear to them that they were solely responsible for their own actions. "Josh has no debt to you. You made your bed," she said. "Lay in it now." She hung up after that. I continued to concentrate on the case in the interim. Sarah was putting in extra hours as she gathered evidence, filed papers, and prepared for what was expected to be a significant court battle. In addition to telling me that we had a strong case, she forewarned me that my parents would use every conceivable tactic to avoid accepting accountability. She was not mistaken. My parents' next attack came about a week after the lawsuit was filed. Once more, they made an attempt to discredit me in public. Instead of posting on Facebook again, they began reaching out to local media sites and presenting themselves as the misguided parents of a brutal tech CEO. In fact, their tale was published in one of the smaller local newspapers. The piece was a jumble of flat-out falsehoods and half-truths. It characterized me as an unappreciative son who had abandoned his devoted parents after they had made so many sacrifices for me. They told a complete falsehood when they said they had helped me pay for college and that I had abruptly stopped talking to them. I was incensed when I saw the piece. I was no longer being attacked by my parents. They made a concerted effort to damage my standing in the neighborhood. Sarah promptly included the article to our defamation case once I forwarded it to her. However, I wasn't just going to let them dictate the story. I made the decision to escalate. I met with Alex and my other business partners the following day to talk about our plan. They were all in favor of going public once more, but with greater context and clarity this time. According to Alex, people must be aware of the entire story. For too long, you've been far too kind. I thus created a new Instagram post. I did more than just share the videos this time. I posted screenshots of my parents' old emails and texts from years ago. Messages in which they said clearly that they didn't care about my future, termed me a waste of time and money, and declined to assist with education. I also immediately responded to the item in the local newspaper, denying all of their falsehoods. I included letters for my scholarships, bank statements proving I had paid for my own tuition, receipts, and even a touching message from Aunt Laura that she had sent to me during my first semester. Within hours, the post went viral. Tens of thousands of people liked and commented on it. People were furious with the newspaper for publishing such a biased report, not just at my parents. The story abruptly changed once the post was taken up by other media. On the internet, my parents were being disparaged. People criticized them for their falsehoods in a barrage of comments on social media. Stephen's LinkedIn profile vanished inexplicably, and Diane erased even her personal profiles. They were obviously feeling the heat. The emails then arrived. Diane wrote me a lengthy, meandering note that alternated between threats and apologies. She stated she never intended to damage me, and that she had only gone to the media because she felt trapped. She pleaded with me to remove my postings, claiming that the negative reactions were ruining their lives. Naturally, Stephen adopted a different strategy. He sent a brief and irate email. "Josh, you're playing with fire. If this doesn't stop, we'll take you to court for invasion of privacy and defamation." I sent Sarah both of the emails. She smirked and replied, "Let them try. They have nothing to stand on." 2 weeks later, the court case was formally opened. Even though my parents had at last engaged legal counsel, it was obvious that they were unprepared for the situation. In the courtroom, Sarah was a shark, dissecting their lawyers' weekly arguments. Our proof was incriminating. The Facebook post, the emails, the texts, and the videos all clearly depicted my parents' true selves. By the end of the first hearing, even their attorney appeared ashamed. Diane attempted to address the judge directly at one point, saying I was exaggerating and that she had been misinterpreted. The judge cut her off right away. "Personal statements are not appropriate at this time," he stated. "Let your attorney speak for you." It was magnificent. My parents were eager to reach a settlement by the time the mediation period arrived. They were losing money while attempting to defend the lawsuit, and they realized they couldn't prevail in court. Their attorney came up to Sarah with a proposal. If I consented to dismiss the lawsuit and take down my posts, they would pay $500,000 in damages. Sarah told me, and I laughed. "No way," I answered. "That's not even close to the devastation they've caused." Sarah returned with a counter-proposal. $3 million. No compromises, no negotiating. They would make the entire payment, issue a public apology, and permanently leave my life. Alternatively, we go to trial. They argued back and forth for a few days before giving in. It seemed unbelievable on the day the deal was finalized. I sat in Sarah's office across from her, looking at the last documents. In exchange for a public apology, Stephen and Diane had promised to pay the whole $3 million. The nicest part was that they were legally prohibited from ever getting in touch with me again. I paused for a while when Sarah gave me the pen to sign the documents. This moment was so much more important than the money, not because I had any reservations. It had to do with defending myself, demonstrating that I was no longer under their influence. It was finished after I signed. No second chances, no appeals. They had permanently left my life. Their public apology fulfilled all of my expectations. It was awkward, coerced, and very degrading for them. Their admission of their deception, manipulation, and the damage they had caused to me and my company was prominently displayed on their social media sites for everyone to see. Their posts received harsh criticism in the comments section. They were criticized for being bad parents, phony benefactors, and generally bad people. After a few days, Diane disabled comments, but the damage had already been done. They had lost their social group. No amount of spin could restore their ruined reputations. They had lost their influence, their contacts, and their reputation. Regarding the $3 million, it was well spent. A sizable portion went directly into my company, enabling us to grow more quickly than we had anticipated. In addition, I saw to Aunt Laura's needs. I took her on the trip of her dreams and gave her money to cover her mortgage. Italy for a month-long vacation. To be honest, that was the least I could do for the lady who saved my life when I had no one else, yet she still sobbed when I informed her. Life has been calm ever since. My company is doing really well. I've created a life I'm proud of, and my friends are still at my side. I feel like I'm in charge of my own story for the first time. Rather than continuing to live under the shadow of Diane's and Stephen's selfishness, do I ever consider them? I occasionally ponder whether they regret the decisions they made, or if they're still sitting in their large home, accusing me of being responsible for all of their problems. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. Their existence, their falsehoods, and their ideas, I don't care about any of it anymore. That's my narrative then. It was a little crazy and disorganized, but everything turned out well in the end. Please don't let your toxic parents or relatives to define you. Create your own life. Be in the company of individuals who genuinely care about you, and when they attempt to bring you down, don't be scared to fight back. In any case, Redditors, I appreciate your time. It's time to relax and take pleasure in the life I have created for myself.